Hello and welcome to You Talking to Me, the Euranet Plus debate. This week, the free trade deal between the European Union and Canada was supposed to be signed, putting an end to 7 years of negotiations. But for the moment, this agreement is completely blocked because of the veto of one small Belgian region, Wallonia. This is, of course, one of the main news these days and another existential EU crisis. In order to talk about this topic, I'm happy to announce that I'm joined by Maria Arena, member of the European Parliament for the Socialist Party and Belgium.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm also joined by Mr. Artis Pabriks. He's also a member of the European Parliament for the European People's Party. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And last but not least, I'm joined by Lola Sánchez. She's also a member of the European Parliament for the United Left.
Thank you.
Thanks and welcome. So the first question is pretty clear. What now? Is it over? Definitely. There is still hope to make this agreement go forward?
Well, hope should never die, and I really believe that we will get all our senses together and we will not throw out the job which was done for 7 years and which was a very good job which was done. So I hope that Belgium will solve its national problems as soon as possible.
Do you think it's going to happen?
I think it's not a national problem. I think that the questions that are asked to the Commission coming from the Walloon Parliament are the questions that a lot of people are asking for the moment on this kind of trade agreement. It is not only about CETA, about Canada. It is about what we are ready to do with trade. And so I think it's totally legitimate to have this question, but I think it is more legitimate to have the answer. And now we are waiting for the answer. And until this treaty is not signed, there is a frame to have a negotiation. So they have to use it to have more fair trade in Europe.
Mm-hmm. I guess negotiations can continue even if the summit was supposed to take place this week, no?
Yeah, but I want to say that this is a big opportunity for the lot of people that are against this kind of trade deals, you know, that don't put in the center the well-being of the people or the protection of the environment, but the enrichment of this 1% that doesn't come from democratic spheres. You know, and they have been writing and dealing with the negotiations and with the negotiators in the table. So I think that Wallonia is very brave, but this is an opportunity to show how many opposition is there in Europe. And I would like to show that it's not only Wallonia, but Wallonia has the power to stop it in Belgium, in the Belgian government. But we have, for example, in Spain, 7 regions that are against these trade deals, but we don't have the power to stop the Spanish government to do so. So many municipalities that are against these trade deals. So this is not an issue about Wallonia. I think that now Wallonia is representing this million of people in Europe that are against these deals.
Mm-hmm. I would like to include in this debate one of the questions coming from one of our Euranet members. Is a question coming from RTBF, the Belgian radio, the question coming from Olivier Henrion.
Good morning. My question is actually inspired by a proposal from Guy Verhofstadt. Do you think it will be democratically legitimate to reconsider the mixed aspect of the agreement in order to overcome the Walloon blockage?
So Verhofstadt, the Liberals leader and former Belgian minister, he has mentioned this possibility of not considering anymore a mixed agreement and just a commercial agreement, so we would not need the ratification of the member states. Is this, it's a pity, we were supposed to be joining this debate by one of our liberal members of the European Parliament, so the question was especially addressed to her, to Ms. Marie Tjage, but I'm sure you can also answer this question. So is this a way of changing the rules in the middle of the game?
No, I think it's totally not right to say that. Or a treaty is mixed and you have to deal with the different member states. And it is the decision coming from the Commission and the Council to say that it is a mixed agreement. So if it is mixed, you have to discuss with countries. If it is not mixed, but you have to say that at the beginning, you don't have to deal with. And now they decided in the mandate that it is a mixed agreement. They decided in the Council that it is a mixed agreement. And now that they have a problem, they want to go back and say it is not a mixed agreement. It doesn't work like that. If you want to have a very clear position of mixed or non-mixed, the only way of having this clear position is to have a decision coming from the European Court. If you have a very clear message coming from the European Court, you can change, but not because you are in trouble with one member state that you have to go back and say it is not a mixed agreement. So this is totally cheating coming from the liberal group saying that now that they have a problem, it is non-mixed. So it is cheating.
Is it cheating for you, Mr. Pabriks?
Well, first of all, I would like to return to the very beginning of argument where we heard that such kind of agreements, they are meant only for 1% of population and disregards the poor. And then I will come to the legislative aspects. First of all, I'm coming from a small, relatively poor European Union country. And I think that actually those people which are opposing this deal, they are really misleading population, because for such country as mine, which is poor, which needs additional trade, which needs additional markets for export, CETA will be exactly the deal which can provide us with opportunity to grow. Because the big corporations, big companies, they don't need such trade deals. They are quite happy also without this trade deal because they have power. But small and medium enterprises, like coming from my country, they desperately need support of such deals, number one. Secondly, if we speak about legitimacy, I would say that yes, there is a certain guilt on behalf of some governments of European Union and also of Commission. But the guilt is actually by proposing this as a mixed agreement. Because what we are doing is actually undermining the fundament of European Union common trade policy since 1957. So we know that Commission actually admitted by telling that they decided to have this as a mixed agreement, namely to decide in European Parliament and in national governments by political decision. So this was not a legal decision, it was a political decision.
It's better to wait the legal decision.
And in this case, I see really a contradiction, because those people who are here arguing for a mixed agreement and claiming that this gives more democracy for trade are actually the same people who, for instance, once we are tackling the migration or asylum quotas or distribution, are telling, oh, this should not be a mixed decision. National parliament should not decide on this. This should be decided just in Brussels. So I think that by taking away something what was decided decades ago as an EU priority, we are undermining the fundament of European Union legislation. And in this case, I would compare actually the damage done by this, and what Wallonia is doing at this moment is damaging EU in fundament, just like Brexit. So I compared it with Brexit
I
damage.
totally disagree with you. Totally disagree with you, because for the moment, when you say mixed or non-mixed, you have an exclusive competence on trade here at the European level. What we have for the moment on the table for CETA and TTIP, it is not an exclusive competence on trade. You know that we have a regulatory cooperation. It is, how is it possible to change the standards between Europe and Canada and United States just on trade agreements? Standards are not trade agreements. Standards are protection for people. And protection for people is not an exclusive competence coming from Europe. So you are totally wrong when you say that. When you say that we are undermining Europe system, no, I will say that we put a democratic decision because we have the right and the duty, the responsibility to do so. You are undermining this position, denying the possibility of having a democratic decision. So we are just working on this for the moment, not on playing a game. Now it is not a game, it is rules. What do we want as rules here in Europe? Not for trade, rules for people.
Before letting you answer, just a clarification. What is the problem? Is the problem that the deal went too far and it should not be a mixed agreement and just a commercial agreement? Or the problem is that we ask the member states for the ratification?
Well, I would say that in this case, as a mixed agreement. I think it should not go. It should be done just by the vote of ratification in European Parliament. But a Council decision here should be done not by each country, but simply Presidency would sign it. And in this case, the biggest problem is that we are trying now to surf on a populist wave and telling that democracy is something that we can decide just in referendums, just on the streets. And by just challenging this, I would say, look, if you really think that the only way to have a democracy is to have referendums or questionnaires, I would go back to Latvia and I would suggest to my government, just like it is in Belgium, let's make a national legislation where a number of EU issues we can sign only if our small regions are agreeing on something. And if you don't do this, I will require additionally 1 billion in cohesion, otherwise I will simply block anything what the EU is doing. And I think this is wrong.
Okay. Lola, your turn.
Okay, I think that this is not a deal or deals about trade, as Maria said. This is not about trade. This is about a lot of things, about how we live and about how we work. And I don't say that. It was said by the negotiator, the American negotiator for TTIP, that this deal will change the way we live and the way we work. So I think that we should debate that. Wallonia decision comes after 1 year of debates inside this camera. We didn't have it in Spain, for example. It was impossible to have a debate in our Congress or in our public media, because media don't want to talk about this. You know, media are inside this deal. You know,
my country should not be a hostage because your media doesn't discuss it in Spain.
Okay, but if media doesn't want to talk about it, government should do it and parliament should do it. And they are blocked.
Because they are their competence.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a huge opposition coming, not only from Wallonia, but we have seen many demonstrations across the continent. So it's European society ready for these kind of deals?
Well, look, you see, I will speak as a professor of political science from my previous life. Yes, we are seeing a lot of challenges in our civilization now because of globalization, because of fragmentation of media, fragmentation of economics, fragmentation of politics. But I think it's very wrong to see trade deals as a scapegoat for all these problems. Because yes, it's not just about trade, but this trade deal is not a panacea to all the problems what we are facing. And to argue that we have a lack of democracy or representation in this case, it's in my view it's a populistic argument, because we had enough chance for 2 years to read this document on the internet, and everybody who wanted to say they could do this, and by just claiming that we have demonstrations against, yes, we do have demonstrations against asylum seekers too. So why do we don't take that this is a public vote in this case?
I just want to say that initially you said that for your country, for your small and medium-sized enterprise, you need this kind of trade agreement. I think that we have to decide in Europe what is good for Europe, for your country, for the other countries. And I think a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises are more interested in internal export and import situation than external. Less than 1% of enterprises are exporting. And what they are asking for us is to have more demand inside of Europe and not asking for more demand outside of Europe. And I will give you a study coming from the CNUSED, the UNCTAD, coming from the United Nations study, saying that trade agreements for the moment are damaging small and medium-sized enterprises. We have to change paradigms. We have to say that we need more winners in trade. And for the moment, we have winners and losers. And we don't care about losers in trade agreements. What we ask for is to have winner and winner. It is what we ask for. It is not because we are against trade. We just want to have a balanced situation with trade and not winner and loser. And it is what we are in this negotiation for the moment.
I would like to say something about the incoherence of this camera, of your party and your group, and of the European Commission, because these trade deals are absolutely incompatible with some commitments that we have made, like for example the Paris Agreement. or the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. No, but we go to we go to New York to sign the SDGs. We go to Paris to sign. 2 weeks ago, we voted here with a very big majority in the Camera. Your group voted in favor of the Paris Agreement, and it's absolutely impossible to compatibilize these two agreements. So, in some of these fora, we are lying. You know, so coherence is needed. And about globalization, I would like to say also that is one of your arguments that we cannot let China to put the rules of the globalization of the world trade and everything, but we are not putting an alternative on the board. We are just joining this race to the bottom in labor rules, in labor protection, in environmental protection, in absolutely everything. So we are not making things different.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with this position. Why? Because I agree that only 1% of small and medium-sized enterprises give an export outside EU. Particularly because of this reason. We need such trade deals in order to rise this percentage rate. Because if we are reading such newspapers or magazines like, for instance, The Economist, we can see that actually internal market is staggering. We have no much chances at this moment to improve this. And in this case, I think we must understand, first of all, from purely trade perspective, that if we are not engaging with another regions, we have a limited chance to grow. And my country, my region wants to grow. Secondly, if we are speaking again about standards and higher standards, I would once more like to remind, trade deals like this, they are improving situation in general. They are giving a better standard compared to the previous trade deals. If it fails, we will deal with a much worse trade deals and systems. And secondly, if we are not managing this deal at this moment, then we are actually saying to the world, and they are watching us, they are looking at us, that these people are incapable to make a deal. So we will basically roll back in the nation state into fragmentation and undermine EU. And from this perspective, my country and my region is suffering the most, because for Spain, France, Belgium or Germany, weaker EU means a little bit less jobs, a little bit less money, but for countries like Latvia, that is actually an existential threat.
But what it would mean, the failure of CETA, and as a consequence, I guess, the failure of TTIP, would it be as catastrophic as some members say?
No, I would say that if it fails, and we don't want it to fail, we want to have a renegotiation of some principles. We don't want it to fail. We want to have fair trade. But if we win in this, we can have fair trade for other trade agreements. So it is really important to win this fight now, to have more fair trade, to have winners, and not to have winners and losers. What I said, when you said that trade model is the best one in the world, when you see the way the salaries, they are decreasing from the years of 80 till now. And it is because we have wages decreasing that the demand is decreasing too. In our region, in the developed countries, in your countries. So what we have to do in Europe is to work on minimum wages, is to work on protection, is to work for welfare.
Will the rich
in
world
Europe.
compensate those wages in our region?
It's to work with this. And with this, you will have a growth in Europe, and you will have other people coming in Europe. So it is interesting to work on this, not to try to find the growth outside Europe, but to find the growth inside Europe. And we have to work on this, not to say that this is desperate and we are not going to have more welfare in Europe. What we want is having more welfare for your country too in Europe.
But not by these methods.
Let answer Lola Sánchez. What would be the alternative if this trade deal fails?
Well, I think that the first point is that this should be a lesson to the negotiators and to the European Commission, that they should never do the same. I mean, sitting in a table and not talking to the people, not having a debate, not having democracy. And one of the problems of this crisis of the European Union is the lack of democracy. So this sentence from the president of the Liberal group makes a lot of pain, you know, for people that are waiting for Europe to have an answer, to take an answer on this lack of democracy. If we don't take this opportunity to change things, it will be, I mean, situations are very polarized. It's people that is defending this trade deal over everything, and people that are saying that we have, of course, an alternative. We have to look inside European Union and the trade inside European Union, and it doesn't mean that we are against trade, and it doesn't mean that we want to block our borders to the exterior. But we need to look for another trade model for all the world, because as Maria said, we have winners and losers, but in the global aspect, the losers are very, very losers, you know, with the extractive model of trade and so on. So we are building a terrible world. We have to stop it.
Yeah.
I believe you wanted to add something. We are running out of time, so if you can say it very quickly, please.
Well, I think we really see here this also ideological divide within the EU. And I would say my understanding, and I respect the position, but I do not support it. My understanding is that many people in political parties in European Union are running behind CETA because they are simply obsessed with anti-Americanism. And they think if they are cutting CETA down, they will cut down also trade deal on transatlantic sphere with the United States. And I think that this is a very wrong perspective, because we should remember that if we want a better world as a globe, the best thing is to ensure liberal democratic values. And the liberal democratic values are the highest democracy standard in European Union. And by not signing CETA, by not accepting CETA, after it was 2 years on internet and everybody could read this, we are simply telling, you know, that we are not a serious people in democracy, and this gives exactly the rise to populists like Le Pen, like AfD, like Trump in the United States.
Yeah.
So this is where we are undermining our democracy by actually telling that we claim more democracy.
Okay, really final sentence, because we are absolutely running out of time.
I just want to say that we are not against neither United States nor Canadian. What we are against are to give the key of democracy to the multinational. When they are in Europe or when they are in other part of the world, we don't want to give the key to the capital. We want to have this key because it is our responsibility. And so we are not against one part of the world, even against China, for example. We just want to say together that it is possible to make trade in another way. And it is what we want to do, because trade now, it is not good for everybody.
Okay, I believe we can continue this discussion for hours because it's very passionate. We will follow with a lot of interest the next hours and the following days to see what finally happens. And of course, we will continue talking about it. Thanks, the three of you, for coming here. And
thank you.
Thanks a lot for watching. See you next week.